Okay, this is the Bethlehem Baptist Chapel, Newport Thames. Subject matter. This is the end painting, and this is the compositional sketch. In the compositional sketch, basically, I've made a dark foreground and a light background, just simplified things down quite a bit. So I'll start off with a cobalt blue sky. I've tried to keep all the brush strokes as calligraphic as possible in this, as fresh as possible. And that seems to do an awful lot in terms of movement and liveliness. So, okay, cobalt blue sky. Getting lighter towards the left, the light is coming from the left, so adding more water to go towards the left. And then yellow ochre then on the left. Yellow ochre on the facade here as well. I do want to keep the facade light, but maybe this is a bit too sugary. I should have added a bit of black, a bit of neutral tint to it. Okay, the shadows. Underpainting the shadows is a red, is a warm colour that will shine through and put a cool colour on top. This is cadmium red. I use some burnt sienna for the underpainting as well in different places. So the road colour, that dry brush on the road, hopefully will make it sing, make it look as though there's light on it. Okay, on the left I'm painting again a warm colour underneath that dark block. So I'm saying all this foreground is going to be quite dark, so I'm painting quite red underneath it. Giving the background fairly light. Red's going in the windows, red going to any dark patches. So that when you put a dark colour on top of it, it does appear to glow. This is speeded up now probably about 400%. This brush I'm using, it's an Escoda, it's a synthetic brush. It becomes a really fine point, holds a lot of paint. It's a Joseph Subotnick signature brush. This is very good. Not too expensive as well. So I'm putting the shadows on now. So trying to keep things quite fresh, quite calligraphic. This brush is really good for that. Shadows and darks inside the building. Just lift off a bit of tissue paper to show that the light shining through. Shadows going on. Now these shadows are going on pretty dark. It's difficult to judge the shadows because you put the paint on and then it dries a lot lighter. So it's difficult. So vary the colour of the shadows. Almost in a random way. Well, yeah, actually in a random way, just vary the colours of the shadows. I think if you put the paint on very convincingly, doesn't matter what you put on, almost. I think the level of conviction is probably 50% of the end result. So that blue shadow at the side of the building that was quite blue could reflect the sky above it. Again, quite calligraphic strokes, quite strong calligraphic strokes. That's a very strong shadow. I've added a bit of white to the shadow on the left there just to give it a bit of smokiness, luminosity. It does help with it. And the shadow then gets a sort of light at the edges, sort of light bleeding through, and then it gets quite a bit darker then where it's there's not much reflected light around. Okay, in the windows that's very dark. It's very dark, this hedge, with a bit of yellow ochre, kind of reflected light on that. That's what I'm trying to say. Then we've got again, there's a bit of white I think in that shadow, and then very dark in the foreground. I should have used a bigger brush for this foreground, but there we are. Okay, so I'm using, so there we are, oh, that's cobalt blue, very dry brush for the windows. I'm saying that's the reflections, muted a bit for that. Darks, these are very dry brush again, just to get some liveliness. The paper I'm using is Saunders Waterford rough paper, and it works well with dry brush technique. Just add bits of detail. Shadows on white objects, they tend to be blue in the sun. Just really reflect the blue of the sky. Bit of detail going on. Windowsills. Ravines. Quite dry brush again in the shadows. Okay, what's this now? The window mullions. I'm using gouache with toned down gouache basically for that. These are the railings in gouache again. Yeah, those shadows behind now, they did look very, very dark, but with the white on in front of them, they don't look too bad. So, use of gouache. Most watercolor painters use gouache or some sort of opaque paint. Was it liquid acrylic or whatever? Yeah, John Singer Sargent, Alvaro, Joseph Zaputnik, that guy, Keith Hornblower, all use it because it's just functional. I've no idea where people got this idea that watercolor should be just use the white of the paper. Turner never did. Yeah, use it for, you know, when it's appropriate, but you also use opaque white where it's appropriate. So again, trying to keep the strokes as lively as possible. Well, I'm trying to make the medium express itself. I think that makes a valid painting. I think you've got to have the medium as being a participant in the creative process, so it's just going to be itself. Okay, classic example, runny paint. I'm trying to get some dynamism in the composition now, and I've no idea what I'm doing at this point, and I'm just looking for accidents, and then I'm editing the accidents, and I'm going to keep the good accidents and get rid of the bad ones. Okay, so yeah, I just put a lot of dark paint on there and dark paint in the foreground, and then I'm just dripping water onto it. This is a very intuitive process. I just do it, and then I look and see what it looks like. There's a kind of rule which is adding similar colour paint to what's on underneath, so you won't change the painting much in terms of colour, but just you add a lot of dynamism to it. This again is gouache. I'm just accentuating the light at that point. Now this gouache is very difficult to judge because it looks completely opaque at that point, but it'll dry really, really faint. There we are. I think that painting's improved drastically from doing that to it. It's become a lot madder, a lot more bonkers, a lot more interesting. And the watercolour is expressing itself as part of the creative process, and I just prefer that sort of painting. I hate static paintings. But having said that, now I'm going to add some more detail to it and make it more static. It's a very fine balance. Now, the more detail I put in, the more static it's becoming. Is that it? No, not quite. There's a funny movement in paintings. If you can get a sense of movement into it, then it adds that dimension that is lacking. You know, life is not a snapshot. Anyway, that is a snapshot of the end painting.